بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله والحمد حقه كما يستحقه حمدا كثيرا. وأعوذ به من شر نفسي إن النفس لأمارة بالسوء إلا ما رحم ربي. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الخلق وخاتم الأنبياء وسيد المرسلين حبيب إله العالمين نبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المطهرين المكرمين. السلام عليك سيدي ومولاي يا أبا عبد الله، وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. قال الله العظيم في كتابه الكريم وهو أحسن القائلين وأصدق الصادقين: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يرفع الله الذين آمنوا منكم والذين أوتوا العلم درجات. آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. For the purification of the souls, the enlightenment of the hearts, for the acceptance of the deeds, and for the hastening of the reappearance of the awaited Savior, Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif, enlighten your souls, purify your hearts with the recitation of salawat upon Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. Respected elders, sisters and brothers in Islam, Salamun alaykum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. This individual is considered to be one of the most outstanding scholars within Islamic history, and specifically within the school of Ahl al-Bayt. A man who is considered to be the first scholar to be known as Ayatullah, a theologian, a jurist, a philosopher of great status and degree, and a man who sought to disseminate the teachings of Ali Muhammad and was instrumental in the spread of Shiaism. Al-Hasan ibn Yusuf ibn Ali ibn al-Mutahhar, also known as Allamah Al-Hilli, is considered to be one of the greatest scholars within the religion of Islam, and an outstanding individual who gave much towards the dissemination and the spreadings of the teachings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the Holy Quran and the blessed instructions of the Holy Prophet and his progeny, peace and blessings be upon them. Al-Allamah Al-Hilli is a name that many of us have no doubt come across. Sometimes we have heard his name when it comes to majalis. Sometimes he is referred to when it comes to certain stories, certainly ones associated with his childhood. He is amongst a number of other scholars who perhaps their names have been heard of. Sheikh Al-Tusi, Sheikh Al-Mufid, Sheikh Al-Saduq. These names are common names when it comes to the majalis, when it comes to lectures, when it comes to discussions surrounding the history of Shiaism. The question that sometimes we have to ask is, other than referring to their names and knowing that they were great, other than understanding that they were instrumental within the school of Ahl al-Bayt, how many of us know enough about these holy individuals? For the idea that emerges today, and that is, when it comes to these people, when it comes to these scholars, how much they gave from their lives, from their time, how much they dedicated towards the path of the religion of Islam. Is it too difficult for you and I to be able to somehow delve further into their lives, understand their legacy, their background? What is it that we can relate to? How we can continue their teachings today? There are many those around the world who will look at people who have had great impacts on society, on certain communities, from different religions, different societies, and different backgrounds. Institutions that study the biography of others. Yet sadly what we find is the relationship that we have with our ulama of the past sometimes is only confined to stories or references here and there. Is not necessarily a relationship based on gaining knowledge, respect and awe, appreciating the status of these scholars and the position of ulama when it comes to the religion of Islam. No doubt, you may ask the question, why should I study the life of Allamah Al-Hilli, this great scholar who many of us have heard? People like myself are often asked, are you related to Allamah Al-Hilli? What is your connection to Allamah Al-Hilli? That we'll leave for another day and another discussion. But it suffices for us to answer this question thoroughly, because some of you watching tonight will no doubt ask the question, do I need to read into the life of this great scholar? Should I not just simply admire the fact that he existed in history? Why should I know more? Because I go to the libraries today and I see a biography section. There is a biography of politicians. There's the biography of philosophers. There's the biography of humanitarians. These biographies are only studied by people who are writing more biographies about them. Or, for example, if you have a school or college project, not many will come and read about the lives of others unless, for example, they're into politics and they're trying to frame a particular policy for a certain group of people who are inspired by a particular individual. Yet for you and I, inspired by studying the biographies of the Imams alayhim salam, we must not neglect the lives of our ulama. You ask the question why? Let me give you 5 reasons. Number 1, we are those who seek knowledge, aren't we? The first word in the Holy Quran is Iqra, read. Clearly demonstrating the need for you and I to illuminate our hearts with understanding, with ma'rifah, with gaining ilm. The Holy Prophet of Islam, Al-Rasul Al-A'zam, Wal-Nabi Al-Akram, Muhammadin Al-Mustafa, Sallallahu Alayhi Wa Alihi Wa Sallam, once entered Masjid Al-Nabawi in Medina. He saw 2 groups of people. One were supplicating to Allah, another were learning. He said, both I admire and I like, but I will sit with those who are seeking ilm because I have been sent to educate mankind. This highlights the importance of seeking knowledge, no doubt. Amir al-Mu'mineen wa Imam al-Muttaqeen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, in a famous narration, points to the need to identify ourselves and our path towards seeking ilm, especially from ulama. What does he say? He says, هُنَالِكَ عَالِمٌ وَيَعْلَمُ أَنَّهُ عَالِمٌ. There is a group of people who are knowledgeable. They know that they are knowledgeable. Yes? فَهُوَ عَالِمٌ فَاسْأَلُوهُ. Therefore, they are considered a scholar. Ask them. You and I, when we have an opportunity to be in the company of ulama, when we go to visit scholars, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless our true ulama al-Rabbaniyeen, the godly scholars that exist today. It is an opportunity to be able to illuminate our hearts and to ask questions. Then the holy Imam alayhi salam says, there are those هنالك عالم ولا يعلم أنه يعلم. There are those who have knowledge, but they don't know that they have knowledge. فأولئك ناس فذكروه. Those people have forgotten, therefore remind them. And then he says, there are those who do not know and know that they don't know. فَأُولَٰئِكَ جُهَّالٌ فَعَلِّمُوهُ. And those people are ignorant. Teach them. This is the fourth category of people, are those who don't know and don't want to know that they don't know. فَأُولَٰئِكَ what? فَهَذَا أَحْمَقٌ فَارْفُضُوهُ. They are somebody who is what? Who has rejected, should be rejected. Because what? They are not using their intellect in the right way. If I am seeking knowledge, I have to learn from the people of knowledge. I have to take my understanding from the greats that exist out there. Secondly, please understand this, there are those in history and even today who are fraudsters, who are fake, and as far as claiming to be scholars. What do we mean? Every day and age, every so often, we find someone popping up on YouTube, claiming to be a scholar, speaking on behalf of the school of Ali Muhammad. And by the way, just because they wear the turban means nothing. Sometimes people say, but Maulana, he is wearing a turban, either white or black. That means I have to respect him. I have to learn from him, isn't it? I remember Ayatollah Al-Uzma Burujardi, rahmatullahi alayhi, in Hawza of Qum. A group of people came to him distraught. They said, Maulana, we saw a man who's wearing a turban in the streets, in the market of Qum, stealing. In our own eyes, we saw him steal. The Marja' replied, I'm not surprised, because he has stolen before this incident. So what has he stolen? The Marja' said, he has stolen the turban. The Hawza is a garden that has many trees and flowers, but it also has thorns. Understand this. We must not fall in the trap of thinking that just because an individual has graduated from a Hawza or is wearing a turban is necessarily righteous or speaking honestly or speaking in the way that has to be followed, isn't it? Because the Quran gives us a prescription. These individuals who are God-wary are those that must be listened to. يَرْفَعِ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْكُمْ وَالَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمَ دَرَجَاتٍ. Allah raises those amongst you who have iman and what? And have knowledge, status. But this knowledge has to come with certain conditions. إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهِ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءِ. The true ulama are God-fearing. The true ulama are God-conscious. The true ulama have good akhlaq. Amir al-Mu'mineen wa Imam al-Muttaqeen Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi famously says, Man nassaba nafsahu linnasi imama. If you claim that you are a leader for the people, فَعَلَيْهِ أَنْ يَبْدَأْ بِتَعْلِيمِ نَفْسِهِ. They must begin with teaching themselves قَبْلَ تَعْلِيمِ غَيْرِهِ, before they teach others. Today, if you see a particular scholar, an individual, or somebody rather who's wearing a turban, who misbehaves, whose akhlaq leaves a lot to be desired, know that the ilm has not had an impact on them. Know that they are not necessarily reaching that level to be referred to as an alim, because the more knowledge you have, the more humble you become. The more knowledge you have, the more great your akhlaq is. The more knowledge you have, the more God-fearing you become. And the more knowledge you possess and acquire, the more you recognize that the more knowledge that you need. And so, we need to look at examples like Allamah Al-Hilli so that we can learn to be able to distinguish the true ulama, the true distinguished scholars. Number 3, no doubt they exist as role models, exemplary for you and I in their daily lives when we study the lives of these great scholars. Number 4, It is the least that we can do to honor their legacy, to appreciate their works, to understand how they delved and discussed certain matters, certain theological aspects, spiritual dilemmas, for example. Number 5, of great importance, there are many misconceptions, objections, myths, ideas that are plaguing society in this day and age and throughout history. When I study Allamah Al-Hilli's life, I find examples of how he dealt with these challenges. Maybe I can be inspired. Maybe I can be illuminated and motivated to somehow look at the way in which this great scholar dealt with these problems, so that I can deal with it too, so that I can face it in the right manner. Because I tell you, my dear sisters and brothers, we should not dismiss some thoughts and minds that exist, especially in the hearts and in the thinking of our youth today. Some have come forward and say, I'm confused about Islam. I see contradictory actions. Some who wish to practice are put off by certain individuals. Others do not know which particular type of thinking they should be following. Others come and confess on social media, for example, that I find Islam overwhelming. I'm not sure where I have to begin. I have many questions and they are not being answered. One suggestion that I have is that now we have GPs, general practitioners, and they have clinics, yes? Parliamentarians, members of parliaments, have what? Have sessions that people come and see them. We need also spiritual clinics. What does that mean? That means in a day and age where somehow our minds are being poisoned and polluted out there, well, all kinds of ideologies, dangerous thoughts, misconceptions, do we expect all the youth to stand steadfast, to be able to differentiate the haqq from the batil? We need them to have access to our ulama. We need them to have access to the righteous, to the thinkers, to the educated in society, so they can sit there and begin to speak and to open up their hearts and to be able to engage in discussion. Yes? Sometimes some people say this may be an opportunity for madrasas. Madrasas have a very important role, no doubt. But what we need an opportunity where ulama, resident alim or other scholars have regular sessions or opportunities for people to call them, to contact them online, post-COVID perhaps, to try and come and see them and to say, you know what, it's not that I have a question. It's not that I have a fiqhi area or I have a dispute in my marriage that I want you to help, which is important and there is a role for ulama and others to play. But I have doubts. But I have much misconceptions. I need guidance on so many areas. Sometimes some of our youth need that push, need that encouragement to be able to find support, find help in these areas. Within this is the delicate, sensitive subject of marji'iyya and ulama. Please pay attention to this. Because somehow when I have discussions with our mu'mineen, sisters and brothers in different parts of the world, this concept constantly comes up. Many people have questions regarding wilayat al-faqih, regarding why should I follow one marja'? Why should that marja' be the most knowledgeable? Where does my khums money go? For example, why do I find some Islamic rulings illogical? I can't seem to fathom it. I can't seem to understand it. Legitimate questions. Sometimes they're posed in Q&A sessions, which is good. Sometimes they're posed in other opportunities. This is a healthy, progressive movement in the sense that we must not dismiss these questions. We must not be afraid to answer these questions. We must engage and to be able to have interactive dialogue and to be able to say these questions have answers. At the same time that they have answers, we should be looking sincerely to benefit ourselves and not necessarily to weaken an institution that was founded on much effort, commitment, determination, blood and sweat of hundreds of years of our ulama, including Allamah Al-Hilli. In the idea that the marji'iyya and the system of taqleed is our pride and honor. Marja'iyya and the role of our ulama and what they have sought to establish and what they have achieved over the years is a source of great pride in the school of Ahlul Bayt. And I promise you, those outside the school of Ahlul Bayt are jealous. They wish they had a fraction of the system of Marja'iyya. They wish they had somebody who with one fatwa galvanizes, mobilizes millions who stand to defend humanity against the scum of this earth. Who can do that in the Muslim world other than the grand marja' taqleed of the Shias? Therefore, if I genuinely and sincerely have objections, misconceptions, questions about marja'iyya, about taqleed, about the marja', I should seek a journey of enlightenment to improve myself and not undertake a carefully, meticulously planned objective to destroy, to weaken, to distance people away from these great scholars who have only come to serve us. They're not there to make and amass millions or to somehow build kingdoms. They are God-weary. They are not ma'soom though. Marja'iyya is not a perfect system. I'm not going to sit here and say everything about it is great. Yes, there are ways in which it can be reformed. There are ways in which it can become better. But our role is to help it from within. Our role is to support it and progress throughout by ensuring that what? That we become individuals who understand the role that ulama play today and the role that our ulama played, such as Allamah Al-Hilli, Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayh. That's why it is of great importance that I would like to analyze some aspects of the life of this great scholar, to learn important lessons to apply to our lives. This great individual was known by his enemies and those who disputed him as Ayatul Dhaka, the sign of intellect. And indeed, he is referred to as Jamalul Deen, the beauty of religion. Subhanallah. How amazing is it to be referred to as the adornment of religion due to his outstanding characteristics, his abilities, the fact that he made his mark upon history and made tremendous contributions in terms of many different disciplines and sciences. When it comes to this great scholar, Allamah Al-Hilli, you find that he is from the city of Hilla. The city of Hilla is where? In modern day Iraq, approximately 100 kilometers south of Baghdad, 60 kilometers from Karbala. In the 7th century after Hijrah, we find that what? The Hawza of Hilla became the number one, as opposed to the Hawza of Najaf for a short period of time. The center of Shia studies was where? In Hilla. And you find the likes of, for example, Ibn al-Fahd al-Hilli, the likes of Ibn Idris al-Hilli, the likes of the maternal uncle of Allamah Al-Hilli, Al-Muhaqqiq Al-Hilli, Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhim ajma'een, having a pivotal role in ensuring that the dissemination of the teachings of Ali Muhammad continued in this way. The father of Allamah Al-Hilli, his name is Sadiduddin Yusuf ibn al-Mutahhar. He was a scholar, he was a theologian, but he had an important role as well. Please understand the role of the father of the Allama. Because we find in the year 1258 Gregorian, the grandson of Genghis Khan by the name of Hulagu Khan was determined to invade the cities of Hilla, Karbala and Najaf. He had set his eyes. One of the objectives of the Mongols was to conquer land, was to kill, was to plunder. Yes? And therefore, the father of Allamah Al-Hilli, Sheikh Yusuf ibn al-Mutahhar, goes and meets him, sits with him, discusses with him, uses diplomacy. And he convinces him not to attack Karbala, Najaf or Hilla. And they are saved. You see, our ulama are also great at being guided and motivated by the Ahl al-Bayt alayhum as-salam to seek ways which are peaceful, to solve problems in such a manner. Yes, confrontation, resistance, sometimes standing up against oppressors is needed, but this method is also needed. Because today, some people are calling for only one way. They say this is the only way. We see dhulm and oppression, we have to stand up, and yes, and we have to fight it. Very well, absolutely. But the Ahl al-Bayt use different methods. Yes? Today, we must not deploy only one method. Allamah Al-Hilli's father was able to save these cities from complete annihilation and destruction. I tell you, this Hulago would have destroyed the shrines of the Ahl al-Bayt alayhum as-salam. No doubt, isn't it? That's why this great scholar, Al-Allamah Al-Hilli, Al-Hasan ibn Yusuf ibn Ali ibn Al-Mutahhar, radwanullahi ta'ala alayh, is born in the year 1280 Gregorian. And he's born in the month of Ramadan. When he's born, his mother said that every time I would feed him, I would be in the state of wudu. I would be in the state of tuhur, and I would be feeding him. What we are told is that he grew up in this scholarly household, and by the age of 13, he attained ijtihad. Allahu Akbar. Imagine. No doubt, most of us today, tonight, listening to this, would probably know one story from the life of Allama when he was young, yes? Many of us know that he was a child prodigy. That from a young age, he acquired so much knowledge, he was able to take in so much knowledge, people recognized his degree of excellence. And that's why this famous story is narrated, where he was 9. And when he wanted to play and his father wanted him to study, he would come and recite verses of the Quran in which sajda is wajib. His father would go into sajda, but he wouldn't. He would run away. Later, when he was asked, why didn't you go into sajda as well? He said, I'm only 9. It's not wajib upon me. I'm still not mukallaf. Yes? He became an individual who gathered and was able to discuss Islamic sciences at this tender age. Today, we have some of our youngsters, may Allah bless them, who have fantastic abilities, who are great in certain aspects, not only in religion, not only in certain sciences, not only in sports, but in many different fields, in debating, in public speaking. We need to have schools. We need to have educational systems within our own centers, within our own setups, to nurture talent from a young age. Every community will have children with special talents. Are we tapping on this talent? Are we developing this talent? Are we encouraging this talent? There are some youngsters who could be Noha reciters. There are some youngsters who could be ulama and speakers. There are some who could have great ability to become politicians or thinkers. In whichever field in society, we may be able to support parents to identify talents in the community, nurture them, develop them. Not necessarily expose them, because exposing from a young age is not necessarily a good idea. But in a way, be able to support their development without a shadow of a doubt. Allamah Al-Hilli became what? A mujtahid. And he continued his studies. One of his great scholars, which was a teacher of Allamah Al-Hilli, his name is Khawaja Nasir ad-Din al-Tusi. Please don't mistake him with Allama al-Tusi. Khawaja Nasir ad-Din al-Tusi was a mathematician, a philosopher, and a great theologian. He was a great scholar within the school of Ahl al-Bayt, but he had a very important achievement. He built the first, according to many reports, he built one of the first areas in which people were able to use astronomical tools. Yes? And he had a massive library, 400,000 books in this particular library. Khawaja Nasir ad-Din al-Tusi taught Allamah Al-Hilli mathematics, logic, and a number of other sciences. He was also a student of Allamah Al-Hilli. You say to me, how? He used to attend lessons of fiqh and usul of Allamah Al-Hilli. The teacher was a teacher in certain instances and a student in other instances. Allahu Akbar. Look at the tawadu', the humility of our ulama. Sometimes some people say, no, it's too much of me to sit in a majlis. I can't listen to a particular speaker. Yes? Or I'm not attending this program because I ought to be speaking or I ought to be reciting. Look at our ulama. A teacher then goes and asks his student, teach me fiqh and usul. And he becomes a student. That humility is just outstanding. Yes? That's why we recognize that the age of 28, the maternal uncle of Allamah Al-Hilli, Al-Muhaqqiq Al-Hilli, Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhi, passes away. And Al-Allama becomes the marja', At-Taqleed, who is followed by the Shia, yes, around the world. He was outstanding in what? Teaching and in authoring. Today, there are estimates between 101 to 500 books written by this great scholar. Amongst them were interesting works on different fields. For example, Rijal, Ilm al-Rijal, the study of the authenticity of the narrators of hadith. The hadith itself, there are works when it comes to what? For example, tafsir and philosophy and other disciplines within the religion of Islam. Some of them were written by Allama on his journey towards Karbala. One of these books was Tabsiratul Muta'allimin. This Tabsiratul Muta'allimin was a book on fiqh. He says to his name is Sheikh Mohammed. Yes? And this particular son later became an individual who was also a great scholar. He says to his son, whilst I was on the donkey riding towards Karbala, he used to have a practice every Thursday night to go to ziyarah of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. He wrote this book, Tabsiratul Muta'allimin. Many times we come across stories of our ulama utilizing every minute, yes, of their lives. In prisons, they would write books. On journeys, they would indeed author. A lesson for you and I, that sometimes we take time very much without consideration. We take it lightly, yes. I'm not here to necessarily instruct or to tell people what to do. But ask yourself this question. Post-COVID, when most of us return back to flights, and I'm sure most of you are looking forward, I'm sure, to going on these long-haul flights, especially in the summer, where many of our communities attend at least 50 nikahs around the world. Yes? When we go to these particular nikahs in different places, Canada and Africa and different areas of the United States, we are on long-haul flights, 10 hours sometimes, 9 hours, 7 hours. Ask yourself this question. Allahu Akbar, how many movies can you see and watch? How many times do you want to sleep and just waste time whilst you're waiting, at least use part of the journey for gaining ilm. Use part of the journey for understanding, for ma'rifah, for building, for character strengthening. Yes? Because I tell you, each and every minute, Allah Ta'ala will hold us accountable for. Whether we are on the flight, whether we are on the train, whether we are at home. Yes? We are responsible for this time that Allah Ta'ala has granted us. There is an important area that Allamah Al-Hilli focuses on in his work, and that is aqaid, theology, our beliefs and our doctrines. Here, there are two important works that Allama authored. One is known as Kashf al-Murad fi Sharh Tajreed al-I'tiqad. This Kashf al-Murad is very important. It's taught in houses today. And the other one is known as Babul Hadi Ashar. What is Babul Hadi Ashar? We have an important text on theology, which is written by Allama. This is known as Babul Hadi Ashar. And the Allama would go through the Aqeedah of the Ahl al-Bayt alayhum as-salam in detail. Why? He would recognize that amongst the biggest challenges that many people would face is their beliefs, is their Aqeedah. Ask yourself this question. The last time that we picked up an Aqeedah book, the last time that we, for example, heard a series of podcasts on some of our beliefs and doctrines, the last time that I subscribed to a course regarding the belief in Tawheed, the oneness of Allah, Adala, Nubuwa, Imama, Eschatology, Akhirah, when was it? How many times in this day and age we find challenging areas related to Aqeedah, relating to Aqaid? And this is considered to be one of the most important areas that we must constantly brush up our knowledge if we have not done so. And even if we are reading, we should read more. Some people ask the question, I wish to begin my Islamic studies. Where do I start? Direct me, guide me. Where should I begin? Hoping that I or others would say, read history. Because it's easy. I sit there and I read, for example, different battles. I'm not dismissing history. School of Ahl al-Bayt have highlighted the importance of understanding historical events. But what is more critical is our aqeedah. What is more pivotal is our beliefs and our doctrines. Allama would emphasize upon the doctrines, upon the aqeedah. He would write tens of books on the beliefs of the school of Ahl al-Bayt. One of them, Allahu Akbar, I wish is translated to English. Maybe somebody watching tonight, somebody hearing this later, would have the ability to what? To get this book translated to English. Do you know what it's called? It's called Kitabul Alfayn fi Imamati Amir al-Mu'mineen. It's called 2,000 proofs for the Imamah of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Peace and blessings be upon him. How many? 2,000. You and I may have 1, 2, 5, 10. Allamah Al-Hilli meticulously brings forth 2,000 evidence for the superiority of whom? Of Mawla al-Muwahhideen, Imam al-Muttaqeen, Qa'id al-Ghurr al-Muhajjaleen, Sayyidina wa Mawlana Ali ibn Abi Talib. Salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. And I tell you, if Al-Hasan ibn Yusuf ibn al-Mutahhar al-Hilli has 2,000 evidence for the Imamah of Ali ibn Abi Talib, how much evidence did Al-Hasan ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib have? And this recognition is of the utmost importance. He highlights much of his work on the belief of Isma. How guidance can only occur when we follow individuals who are divinely chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who must be righteous and pure in their actions. Otherwise, we cannot be considered to be following those who deserve and ought to be followed. And that's why one of the most well-known incidents in the life of Allamah Al-Hilli is related to Aqeedah, Imamah and Tashayyu'. Because in the year 708, some say 705, when he was in his 70s, there was a man who was the ruler of Iraq and Iran, the great-grandson of Hulagu, who was the grandson of Genghis Khan. Yes? And he was from the Ilkhanite dynasty. He was ruling, and he was based in Isfahan in Iran. And he was Hanafi from the school within our brothers, the Ahlul Sunnah. One day he became angry with his wife, and the anger drove him to say that I divorce you 3 times. In the Hanafi school and in many other Islamic jurisprudential schools which are not from the Ahl al-Bayt, if you say at the same setting, despite the lack of the witnesses, that your wife is divorced on 3 occasions, you cannot get her back unless somebody else marries her, consummates the marriage, then divorces her, then you can get back at her. The king, this man by the name of Shah Khuda Bande, yes, this individual became remorseful. He gathered the scholars. Can I get my wife back? They said, sorry. He said, is there a loophole? You know, sometimes the only reason some ulama are referred to or called is Maulana, tomorrow is my khums. Is there a loophole? And this individual also look at the scholars and say, is there a way in which I can gain my wife back? They said, no, there's no way. He said, look around. Is there anybody who can allow me to have my wife back? One of them said, yes, there is a school that is an outcast. We do not consider it to be Muslim, but they claim to be Muslim. They do not necessarily subscribe to this hukum, to this ruling in Islamic law. He says, who are they? They say they are the Rafidites, the ones that who are rejectors. Who is their leader? A man by the name of Allamah Al-Hilli, who is where? Who is in the city of Hilla in Iraq. He says, call him. Allama is then asked to come and to travel all the way to Isfahan to meet the scholar, to meet the king and those who were with him. He deliberately enters the gathering of the king by holding the sandals under his armpits. Now, there are different versions of this story. You'll come across different versions, yes? But one of them is that when he held the sandals under his armpits, he entered and he greeted the king. Those around him became angered. They looked at the king and said, look, we told you, he lacks the basics of manners. He has come to see you. You are the ruler of this land. Yet he brings his sandals. Of course, today, when we go to holy shrines, when we go to mosques, we leave our sandals or shoes outside, or if we bring them, we wrap them, for example. Yes? But Allama did not. He placed it under his armpits and he came. The moment the king looked at him and says, why did you do this? He said, it's because I recall reading that those who were Shafi'ites did so in the presence of the Holy Prophet. Did it when the Holy Prophet of Islam was there, they carried the sandals on their shoes under the armpits. Those amongst the sitting who are Shafi'ites says nonsense. There was not a single person at the time of Rasulullah who was considered Shafi'i. He says, then I made a mistake. It must be the Hanbalis. The Hanbalis also objected. He said, maybe it's the Malikis. He said, no, the Malikis said, none of the Malikis were present at the time of Rasulullah. Finally, he says, maybe it's the Hanafis. Hanafis said, you are talking nonsense. We came many years after Holy Prophet. At that moment, Allama looks at the king and says, we are from a school that comes directly from Rasulullah. Our leader is Ali ibn Abi Talib, who is next to Rasulullah. He says, what do you mean? He says, you have been told that what? That this school of mine is formed by an individual by the name of Abdullah ibn Saba, who is a Jewish individual, who of course is a fake, who does not necessarily exist, or is a fabrication. This is nonsense. Our teachings are directly from the Messenger of God. This Shaykh Banda was inspired. Also because he was able to get his wife back, of course. But at the same time, there were a number of debates that took place later. So some people only heard this story and then they know that Iran became Shia. No, it took a while. Yes, several gatherings. For example, Allamah Al-Hilli would sit with a number of people and he would have debates. One of them said, what is the evidence that you recite salawat upon the Ahl al-Bayt? You should not. Yes? Look at our ulama. They do not go to the obvious answer straight away. Most of us would come and narrate the hadith from Bukhari that the Holy Prophet of Islam would say that what? That when people were asking him, how do we recite salawat? He said, we have to mention my name and my family. Allamah Al-Hilli comes from a different angle. He says, look at Surah Al-Baqarah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, الَّذِينَ إِذَا أَصَابَتْهُمْ مُصِيبَةٌ قَالُوا إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ أُولَٰئِكَ عَلَيْهِمْ صَلَوَاتٌ مِّن رَبِّهِمْ وَرَحْمَةٌ. Those are the people who deserve the salawat because they are patient when they are afflicted with a musibah. This scholar looks at Allama and says, tell me one thing, which musibah did Ahl al-Bayt go through that they deserve the salawat? Allama looks at him and says, many masa'ib, but one of them is you. He says, what do you mean me? He says, the fact that you do not recognize them and see them worthy of the salawat is a musibah in itself. Yes? The recognition is that Allama stayed in Iran for a while. He would go and speak to people. He would go and spread the knowledge. Many things were changed. For example, the adhan was changed. The coins were changed to reflect that the madhab in Iran became the madhab of Tashayyu' Isna Ashari, to follow the school of Ahl al-Bayt. But what Allama did, Al-Hilli Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhi, also recognized a number of factors in society, and like many other ulama that we need to learn from today, would go and seek the social ills and try to correct them. Even in his presence in Iran, there are a number of interesting stories narrated about him. For example, once he saw a speaker, a famous, well-known speaker, a dhakir, not an alim, a dhakir, who was sitting there and not influencing people. In other words, people would just listen to him and there was not much change. There was not much influence. So he decided to go and visit his house without him being there. He knocked on the house door. His wife comes out. She says, can I help you? He says, are you the wife of so-and-so? She says, yes. He says, I have a question. He says, go ahead. He says, has this man committed certain crimes? Does he do certain things which are haram? She said, I don't know who you are, and I'm not supposed to divulge secrets, so I can't tell you. Allama says, I am whom? I am this and this person, and I have come to help him, so don't worry, you can tell me. This lady says, yes, he gambles at home and he drinks alcohol. He drinks alcohol. Allama says, please tell him, yes, if he was a slave, he would have respected his master. This is a line from Imam Musa ibn Ja'far. Yes, when he told Al-Bishr al-Hafi, and this particular lady would go and inform her husband that if you wish to be an individual that has an impact, if you wish your words to penetrate the hearts of humankind, make sure that you are not hypocritical. There is no dichotomy between your private life and your public life. And that's why Al-Allama would then write a monumental works known as Minhajul Karamah, in the proof of the wilayah of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Why? Because his son was requested by an individual who is another sultan in Iran, give me more proof, I want more proof about the status of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And he writes Minhajul Karamah. Incidentally, in one incident, this sultan sent a scholar to debate Allamah Al-Hilli. Allama said, before you debate me, speak to my son. Fakhrul Muhaqqiqeen, his son was called. Yes, his name is Muhammad. This Fakhrul Muhaqqiqeen says, come, let's walk together with this scholar from another school. He says to him, what is your question? He says, I do not believe that Ali ibn Abi Talib was the Khalifa of Allah after Rasulullah. It was the first Khalifa Abu Bakr. This scholar, who is the son of Allama, says, I have one question for you. Who is the Imam of Fatima? The scholar says to him, what do you mean? He says, let me ask you, do you believe that the hadith of the Holy Prophet says, Man mata walam ya'rif imam zamanih, mata mitat al-jahiliyyah? Anyone who dies and does not recognize the Imam of their time, dies the death of ignorance? He says, yes, we have this hadith. He says, who then was the Imam of Fatima? The man lowers his head because he knows it must be none other than Amir al-Mu'mineen. Yes? And therefore, he has to be what? The Imam of that time. Otherwise, he would then admit to Sayyidatun Nisa, God forbid, dying the death of Jahiliyyah. Allama wrote this book, Minhajul Karamah. But this is where his akhlaq, his mannerism, the status of our ulama would be demonstrated for all history to see. Yes? Where there was a contemporary to him by the name of Sheikh Ahmad ibn Taymiyyah, who is the father of modern day terrorism and extremism. And sadly, millions of Muslims today revere him and respect him. With all our respect and love to our brothers and sisters, this is an academic discussion, but we invite them to look in the life of this particular individual. How much hatred he spewed against Ali Muhammad. How a Nasibi Ibn Taymiyyah is. Yes? How his fatwas were used by Daesh to behead and burn people. Ibn Taymiyyah gets a copy of the book of Allamah Al-Hilli, Minhajul Karamah. He writes a reply, Minhajus Sunnah, the path of the Sunnah. No problem. We encourage discussions. We encourage dialogue, intellectual, academic responses, exchanges between ulama. It's healthy. However, when a supposed scholar stoops to a law of insults against ulama, then you can see their reality. Let me quote to you what he says about Allamah Al-Hilli. He says, Huwa min ahl al-jibti wa-taghut. This is in his book. Who? Ibn Taymiyyah in his book. He says, Allamah Al-Hilli is from the people of arrogance and transgression, wan-nifaq and hypocrisy. كان وصفه بالنجاسة أولى من وصفه بالتطهير. I have to describe him as the impure one. I can never call him Ibn al-Mutahhar. I call him the son of Munajjas, the son of the impure one. Then he says, in another part of the book, he says, إن هذا المصنف, this man who's written this work, الرافضي الخبيث الكذاب. This man who's not only a Rafidi, he is also wretched and a liar. You can here begin to see the difference. Yes? You begin to see the class, the status of ulama. Yes? Did Allama reply to him with insults? No. He would say, Al-Shaykh Ibn Taymiyyah. So Allama responded to him, no doubt. But he responded with utmost akhlaq. Incidentally, there is a famous story narrated that later on Allama goes to Hajj. And when he's in Hajj, he meets Ibn Taymiyyah, but Ibn Taymiyyah doesn't recognize him. And Ibn Taymiyyah is surprised by his level of knowledge and ilm. Later, Ibn Taymiyyah does not ask his name. When he moves away, he says, that man who is very knowledgeable, who is he? They looked at him and says, he is the man who you call the son of the impure one. In the recognition that Allama amongst our ulama was a demonstration of great mannerism, characteristics that you and I have to apply in our lives today. And no doubt, the Allama, like many other scholars as well, was supported by Holy 12th Imam, Sahib al-Asri wal-Zaman, Ajjalallahu ta'ala, farajahu al-Sharif. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And there are a number of very interesting stories that are narrated regarding the relationship and the interaction and the meetings between the Holy 12th Imam and Allamah Al-Hilli. In which way? One time Al-Allama obtained the book that he was seeking and looking for a long time. But the person who gave him the book said, you only have it for one night. I need it tomorrow morning. And therefore, at that time, there were no photocopiers. There was no other way other than to copy the book. So Allama begins to write and write, but he falls asleep. He's tired. He wakes up in the morning. At the time of Fajr, he recognizes that the book is complete, that somebody has written it. And he goes through the book and the copy, and he finds the last sentence in the copy. It says, completed by Al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan. Yes. And then he begins to understand that it was what? It was the Holy 12th Imam. In another occasion, narrated by a number of ulama, this story, in one of his ziyaras to Karbala, Al-Allama says that I was traveling on my donkey and I came across a Bedouin, an individual who was walking. I began to talk with him. I recognized that he has much knowledge, that we began to discuss some complex jurisprudential areas until we came to a point of conflict, where he said, this is the ruling on this matter. I said to him, no. He said, yes. I said, why? He said, because you'll find the hadith in Sheikh al-Tusi's book, in this chapter, in this page, in this section. He says, at that moment, I began to think and wonder, could this be the awaited Savior? I looked at him and said, is it possible for us to meet the Holy Imam, the 12th? He said, when I asked him that question, I had a stick on my hand when I was riding the donkey. It fell on the ground. He said, that man picked up the stick. He placed it on my hand, then placed his hand on mine and said, his hand is on your hand. He said, I fell on the ground crying in disbelief. When I fell on the ground, I looked up and he was not there. Yes, this was an honor that Allama had, like so many others, to be able to be bestowed with the meeting of the awaited Savior, Ajjallahu ta'ala farajah. That is why, in honor of Allamah Al-Hilli, who is buried next to Amir al-Mu'mineen, there are those, many, who go in their millions, visit Amir al-Mu'mineen, and then they pay their respects to Allamah Al-Hilli. Yes, in a chamber right next to the Darih of Allama. What an honor that Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala has honored this great scholar, yes, who dedicated his life for Islam, but especially for the school of Ali Muhammad, especially for the dissemination of the teachings of the wilayah, yes, to present proof after proof of the legitimacy of the wilayah of Amir al-Mu'mineen, to be buried next to Amir al-Mu'mineen. What an honor it was for Allama, yes. But I ask you, narrations tell us that Allamah Hilli passed away in the month of Muharram. And I found some suggesting that he passed away on the night and the eve of the 11th of Muharram. Sham Ghariba. Allahu Akbar. This great scholar would leave this world in a night of sorrow and grief for Ali Muhammad. And what a night it was. The night that was painful and difficult for the Ahl al-Bayt to recall. Each and every member of the Ahl al-Bayt after Imam Hussain would mourn in their own way. They would cry in their own manner. They would establish majalis in their own setups. Imam Zayn al-Abidin, Imam Muhammad al-Baqir, Imam al-Sadiq, Imam al-Kalam, Imam al-Rida. Imam al-Sadiq would cry in some occasions that people did not expect him to cry. In one occasion, the Abbasids burned the house of Imam al-Sadiq. Imam al-Sadiq gathered his family members and began to look left and right. Then the tears began to trickle from his eyes. They said to him, Ya ibn Rasulullah, are you crying because of the state of your house? He said, no. They said, are you crying because some of your family members have been hurt? They said, no. They said, Ya Ja'far ibn Muhammad, what brings those tears to your blessed eyes? He says, when I saw my ladies, my women, my daughters running from one chamber to the other, running away from the fire, I remembered the sight on the plains of Karbala. I recalled how it was for the daughters of Hussain, for the daughters of Ali to run for their lives. When fire had caught their dresses, when they were being chased by the army of Umar ibn Sa'ad, Allahu Akbar. That night was painful, that night was difficult, that night was full of anguish and hardship for Ali Muhammad, but especially the children. Today, when we lose our loved ones, today, when we have lost someone who is close to us, it takes us a few days to begin to somehow have closure. We cry, we mourn, we love to go to their burial, we hold a majlis in any shape or form so that we remember them in good light. Did the Ahl al-Bayt have moments to mourn about Abdullah? Did they have a chance to mourn their husbands and their brothers and their fathers? Or were they indeed chased and their hijab taken away from them? And one of them was this young child of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein. Hamid ibn Muslim says, I saw her dress burning. I looked at her. I began to extinguish the fire. I looked at her and I could see fear in her eyes. She looked at me and says, oh man, are you for us or are you against us? I said, I am neither for you or against you. She said, Ya Shaykh, hal qara'at al-Quran? Have you read the Quran? I said, yes. Have you read the verse, فَأَمَّا الْيَتِيمَ فَلَا تَقْهَرْ? Surely the orphans do not hurt, do not injure their feelings. Yes, oh young girl, I have. Why are you quoting this verse? Ya Shaykh, ana yatimatul Hussain. I am the orphan of Abu Abdullah. I tell you, let me think about this moment. A young child running in the midst of the battlefield, next to the bodies, the dress catching fire, hijab taken away, yet she speaks about the fact that she is yatimatul Hussain. Her heart is broken, yes. May Allah bless all the orphans around the world today. Yes. She looks at him. She doesn't ask for water. She doesn't ask for food. She doesn't ask for any nourishment. She doesn't ask for protection. She doesn't say, oh man, protect me, I am scared. She says, oh man, show me the direction of Ghari Najaf. Huh? Why? Why is it that you want that direction? They said, my grandfather Ali is buried in that place. I wish to speak to my grandfather, Amir al-Mu'mineen. It's time for my heart to connect with Ali ibn Abi Talib. Yes, our hearts are in Karbala, our hearts are in Najaf tonight. We may not be there in person. Ya Allah, don't deprive us from ziyarah of Amir al-Mu'mineen, of Imam al-Hussein, of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. This young daughter of Imam begins to say, I would say to him, how they have tortured us, how they have killed us, how how they have chased us from one place to another. This young girl then says, oh man, take me towards the direction of where? Of Furat, Alqami. This Humayd bin Muslim thinks that she wants water. Why do you want to go there? Oh Sheikh, they said, my uncle Abbas is next to the Furat. I didn't bid farewell to my uncle Abbas. Maybe I can see my uncle Abbas. I tell this young girl of Aba Abdullah, you were tortured on Sham Ghariba, but come and see what they did, Ya Aba Abdullah, to your daughters and women. Imam Zain al-Abidin was asked, what was so painful for you? He said, Ash-Sham, Ash-Sham. Why, O Zain al-Abidin? What was so difficult in Sham? He would say that they would keep us under uncovered prisons. Our faces would be burnt by the rays of the sun. Allahu Akbar. They would throw and pelt stones on us. They would drag us. They would poke spears on the backs of the daughters of Hussein, of the sisters of Hussein. They would drag us, humiliate us in the market bazaar of Sham. But there is one side, one story that breaks the heart tonight in Imam Zain al-Abidin's memory, when he recalls how painful it was for the chains that were placed around his neck. Allahu Akbar. When he saw a man who was a companion of the Holy Prophet of Islam, he says to him, oh man, give me a piece of cloth. I ask you, when else did Imam Zain al-Abidin ask for a piece of cloth? Yes, he only asked in 2 occasions for a piece of cloth. Once when he was in Karbala, burying the body of his father Hussein, because he asked for a piece of cloth from Bani Asad. They said to him, why do you want a piece of cloth? He said, every time I pick up the body of my father Hussein, a part of it falls out. I want a piece of cloth to gather the body parts of my father Hussein. Now in Sham, do you have a piece of cloth? They say, why? He says, Wallah, the chain is digging into my neck. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين وإنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. I have had special requests from one of the ladies in our community here in the United Kingdom who is suffering with illness. There are some of our sisters and brothers who are going through difficult times with COVID-19. There are others who are going through hardship, difficulty around the world in countries like Yemen, Bahrain, Palestine, Syria, Myanmar, China, Kashmir, other countries where they are going through oppression. They ask us to remember them in dua. These majalis, these tears are special in the heart of Imam Sahib al-Asr wa Zaman. Let us not belittle or any shape or form underestimate the value of the dua after a majlis of Hussein. Raise your hands. Let's pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the fulfillment of the hajat of the mu'mineen and mu'minat. All of us tonight have hajat. All of us have people who have requested us that we remember them in dua. Let's ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to fulfill their needs with the recitation 5 times of Ayatul Mubarakah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء 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 أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. يا الله 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 يا الله. إلهي بفاطمة وأبيها وبعلها وبنيها والسر المستودع فيها يا الله، شافي وعافي مرضانا بحق مريض كربلاء زين العابدين. تقبل منا هذا القليل، اقض حوائجنا بحق محمد وآله الطاهرين، وإلى أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات.